one of the things that people don't talk about much in Ruby, a language feature which is not used much and not well documented, are safe levels. And those of you from the Perl community know about tainted strings and stuff like that. This is similar. So I'm going to blitz through this fairly fast. It is a lightning talk, but I have a little more time, so maybe we can stretch it out. This is meant just to pique your interest and to expose you to this, and I'll have some URLs which I'll also post to the Meetup page so that you can look into this more if you want to. So, you know, this is not to follow along with code. This is just a lightning talk. So let's see. Maybe I should drag this over a little more.
Just a touch.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Good enough?
That's good.
Okay, we'll go with that. So what are safe levels? Safe levels let you enhance the security of your Ruby programs. And I remember one time a Perl friend of mine looked down his nose at me and said, well, the problem with Ruby is you can't do the thing like you do in Ruby CGIs where a string is tainted. And I found out he was wrong. I don't know when it was introduced into Ruby, but it's been around quite a while. So Ruby does have that. So setting the safe level in the program, it's really simple. You have a global variable in every Ruby program called safe. $sign is for global variables for those new to Ruby. And the default value is always 0. And if you go into IRB, you can do something like that, and we'll see that it's 0. That's from an actual IRB. By the way, P is like puts, only what it does is it gives you an inspect method on whatever object you pass to it. So the output's a little different. You can also set the safe level of your program using the -T option. However, what I found is, so here's a little program you could write that would output the value of safe. And that's just to show you how simple it is. For me, I haven't been able to get the command line T argument to work in either 193 or 2. So I don't know if that, I build from source, I don't know if that has to do with my build or whatever. Maybe it doesn't work, maybe it's been deprecated. So, but that's not actually so important because usually you're going to set it from in your program. So here's an example of a little program where you can set the safe level to 3 and then you just show what it is and you'll see that 3 will get output on the command line. So what does the safe level do actually and how do you use it? Okay, not again.
That's good enough.
The safe level. So what safe level does is, based on the value of safe level, it places restrictions on your program's behavior. And it prohibits certain things from happening, and then it changes some attribute settings for objects. So some of the things it does is it prohibits potentially dangerous operations from operating on potentially tainted data, prevents you from loading files, it prevents you from even reading from environment variables in some cases. All newly created objects are considered tainted, just like in Perl. There's something new to Ruby 1.9 called trust, where you have trusted objects, and we'll talk about that in a few seconds. Can't perform certain file operations, can't perform certain operating system functions, can't perform certain Ruby operations, depending on the value of safe level. So this is the general table that shows the different safe levels from 0 through 4 and kind of in a general sense what they do. So I'll just show you that real quick, and it just kind of repeats the things that we mentioned in the last slide for those different safe levels. So the higher you go, the safer it is. Each succeeding greater safe level includes all the behavior modifications of the lower levels. So as you go up, like if you go from 1 to 2, you get this behavior as well as this behavior, and so on. So as you go up, you get that. Okay. I had a URL here as well, rubydoc.org, docs, programming Ruby, and I'll put this on the page. And this is actually called Locking Ruby in the Safe, and it's out of date, but it will get you started. And I'll show you some other sources where you can get information. So I put the URL again, and no surprise, the information on that page is out of date and not completely accurate. Dave Thomas's Programming Ruby, the Pickaxe book, contains what I think is an up-to-date version, although there's some pretty detailed things, and I haven't tested all of them. So that the Pickaxe book seems to have the most accurate information on it. And the list at both that URL and in the book are very long and detailed, so I couldn't really include them in these slides, but when you go look at them, you'll see them. So I want to comment on that for a second. So one of the problems in the Ruby and Rails community, I don't really consider it a problem, but it can be sometimes, is incomplete documentation because things are moving so fast. And so I was going to just copy and paste into some slides that detailed list out of the Pickaxe book to show it to you folks tonight, but then that constitutes plagiarism. It's like, no, don't want to do that. So, well, another thing that's interesting is Ruby language is now an ISO standard, and that's the standard number right there. And the documents for those cost 238 Swiss francs to download the PDF. I don't know how you make that payment. Maybe PayPal will do a conversion thing for you or whatever. And my guess is that that document is probably out of date also. And that kind of leads to the open source business model. And the open source business model is kind of an unspoken thing, kind of like in the automotive business where mechanics have their trade secrets that they don't share with people. You're getting all this, businesses are getting all this great open source software for free. They're getting it for free. Well, how do open source developers make money? Well, they do consulting, they write books. So I've often thought that sometimes open source developers kind of like don't cover everything completely because they need to make money, and I'm completely cool with that. People are greedy. I've seen businesses just take, and the more you give them, the more they want, and they want you to work for free. Well, the software is free, you should work for free too. So maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. I'm just throwing this stuff out there because as you get, work with Ruby and Rails, you'll run into these types of issues when you're trying to get documentation. So, how do safe levels work beyond the behavior that your program may be prohibited from doing? Safe levels also affect the objects in your Ruby program. And so you have two attributes that are associated with objects when you're at a safe level of 3 or greater. You have tainted objects and you have trusted objects. So actually any Ruby object derived from an external source, like even if you have just a program where you're doing a get s when you're saying input this and someone types in a string, even if your safe level is 0, that object is marked as tainted because it comes from an external source. And if you try that, you'll see that that's true. So anything from an external source is tainted. If it comes from an environment variable, something that someone enters, it's tainted. When the safe level is greater than 3, then any Ruby object created by the program is marked as tainted.
1 minute.
And trusted objects, Ruby 1.9 adds trust. Any objects created are untrusted. Also, the code at safe level 3 is untrusted. So any untrusted code can only modify untrusted objects. Trusted objects can only be modified by trusted code. This just shows how you can use those attributes. Tainted with a question mark is to see if an object is tainted. Untrusted, you check to see if it's untrusted. There's no attribute for trusted. What can you do with a safe level? First off, Rails doesn't use safe levels, so if you do a grep on safe, you'll see it doesn't use it at all. Maybe for performance reasons they're not using it. What can you use them for? System scripts, if you're doing sysadmin scripts on your system and you don't want non-privileged users to do privileged things on your system, use the safe level. Any types of programs that get user input from like a GUI, another good use for safe levels. These days you can actually do mobile applications in Ruby using Ruboto, things like Ruboto for Android and Ruby Motion for iPhone. Security is definitely important when you're in the mobile space. So safe levels are a good utility to use for that. So that's it. This is a quick introduction. Now you know about it. It's there. It works. It's not quite as well documented as it needs to be. That's the URL, and I'll post it on the page. And so that's it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Now we're going to turn it over to Eric, and he's going to give an excellent talk on Rails engines. And thanks, John, for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I will cede the VGA cable to Eric now.